Are you looking to live the American dream as an international student? Well, if yes, then you're not alone. There are about 1.1 million students just like you, and I also happen to be one of them when I did my master's in marketing from Purdue University, where I graduated from in May 2024. I'm Ratik Datta, and welcome to Ratty Expounds, where I talk about my personal, academic, and professional experiences. In this specific video, I'm going to be talking about the harsh reality of the American dream. So, for the life of an individual who's consensuous and works diligently in the US, as a consequence of which he goes on to live the high life, you know, those fast cars and high story buildings, or those huge bungalows, huge mansions, you name it, you have it, you're living the high life if you're a hard worker in the US. In all honesty, whether this term is actually an exaggeration or whether it is actually true is perhaps a video for another day, but I'm going to be talking about this term specifically with respect to an international student, because a lot of international students have very rose-tinted glasses when they go to the US in the bid eventually study and then work and then settle down there. This video will tell you exactly what you need to know before you get behind the steering wheel. So the process of getting permanent residency in the US is very infamously cumbersome and convoluted. Essentially, when you go on as an international student, you go finish your degree, then you get an OPT where you're allowed to work for a year. If your program is a STEM designated course, you get another 2 years, which means you get to work on a student visa, on an F1 visa for 3 years, after which your company would sponsor you and apply for an H1B visa, which does allow you to stay for another 3 years, which can be extended and can allow you to stay for a maximum of 6 years in most circumstances. That's how the case usually goes, and if that doesn't sound complicated enough, I'm going to be breaking it down step by step to explain to you exactly why this is not for the faint of heart. So the first point, let's talk about OPT. As an international student, one thing you need to know is that it's going to be extremely difficult to find a job in the US. And I'm not talking about this with respect to the current job market, which is horrible at this point of time. I'm talking about even in situations when there's a good job market, you might not struggle to find a job for as long as you might have to in this current job market, but you still have to work a lot harder than the local citizens there. And this is simply because companies are not very willing to hire students who are international students, simply because they're not very well versed with how the legalities of hiring an international student goes. There's a misconception that there is an extra cost associated with hiring someone on an OPT, which is not true, simply because someone on OPT already has all the necessary documentation. So essentially all the employer needs to do is to be onboarding them. What does become a little complicated is when they're done with the first year of their OPT, the employer needs to be e-verified, which means that there will be verification to ensure that they are indeed e-verified, which allows the employee to work for another 2 years. So employers, very surprisingly, a lot of employers, as a matter of fact, their entire process of H1B and OPT, and because they're not very well versed with these things, they tend to interchange or tend to mix up the two, and because of which they just avoid hiring international students altogether, because they don't want to have the headache of taking someone on, which is very unfortunate, because for an OPT, like we said, there are no extra costs, no additional costs involved. The other reason is that, again, employers are worried that international students are going to join their organization but then leave within 6 months or a year, even for their home country or even for another organization, which means all that time and money which was invested in their training, not in getting them onboarded. I mean, the charges for onboarding would be the same as a local citizen, but generally speaking, an international student is someone who is viewed to leave an organization much more easily than a local citizen would. So this also makes them a little ambivalent when it comes to hiring international students. So what I'm essentially trying to say here is that you need to brace yourself for a long and arduous journey when it comes to finding employment in the US as an international student, and that is key, because unlike a lot of other countries, you're not really allowed to stay in the US without being employed in some or the other way. Your EAD card allows you to stay for a certain number of days. Now there are ways to circumvent it. I can make a video on that, and legally, of course, there are ways to legally circumvent it. You can work for an NGO, for example. I can expound on that in another video. But the point is that it is complicated to stay back if you're not employed in the US, unlike other countries like Canada and the UK. So finding a job is of paramount importance, and even stay back in the country, and this makes the entire process very, very tedious. So this is something you need to brace yourself for before you decide to take that jump and go to the US. The second thing you need to know is, well, you've done all the hard work of securing a job in the US. Now now the challenge is to actually stay in that job now, because now, of course, this is not a question on your ability or your commitment. It's just that sometimes economic cycles, they're very, very unpredictable. It's a cycle of ups and downs. So if you unfortunately end up being employed at a time, laid off as a result, you will again have to go through the entire process of looking for a job, which is very straining on the mind and body both. Even if you're not laid off, you always have that sword hanging over your head that, you know, I need to stay in this job if I want to stay back in this country, which is not exactly a very comforting feeling. Notwithstanding all of these things, even if you do end up working at the organization that you're working for 3 years, the point is that you need to get into what is known as the H1B lottery system. So an H1B visa is essentially a visa which is given to, when you're allotted an H1B visa, you're technically you're officially going off your student visa and getting into an employee visa in the US. So an H1B visa essentially allows international citizens to work in the US, given that they have a certain skill set which the local citizens of the country don't have. So now having an issuing an H1B visa requires a company to be sponsoring that candidate, which is a very time consuming, cumbersome and expensive process. If you add up, all visa can vary from about $2,000 to $7,000. It is a considerable expense, especially if an employer is looking to hire multiple employees on the H1B visa. And that's not it. And which is also another reason why employers are even hesitant to hire international students in the first place, because they don't want to go through the entire headache of the H1B process. But even if we were to say that the employers are okay with it and they do sponsor you for your H1B visa, a lot of whether you actually get that visa is dependent on luck. Because just take this into consideration. There are 65,000 H1B visas issued each year for undergrad students and another 20,000 H1B visas issued for graduate students. And we went through the numbers, right? We said that there are 1.1 million students, international students in the US as of 2023. Now, of course, an argument can be made that not all 1.1 million students are going to be graduating at the same time. But another data set shows that as of 2023, about 200,000 students were freshly enrolled in the graduate courses. So now if we take the 200,000 as our point of reference, so out of the 200,000 international students who will be looking to get an H1B visa, only 80,000 would be eligible to get one. And that's not all. There are other conditions that need to be fulfilled as well. For example, chances of getting an H1B visa is completely dependent on luck, the nature of your work, or how good your GPA was, or the prestige of the university that you attended. It's all based on luck and destiny. I mean, I personally do not believe in luck. It's all based on a lottery system, which is actually not fair in a lot of people's minds. But then that's just how the system currently is as of the time of shooting this video. Well, again, referring to what I said earlier, the H1B visa allows you to stay for another 3 years, after which you can get an extension for another 3 years. Now, thankfully, one good thing is that you do not need to enter the lottery again for those 3 years. It is relatively simpler to be extending that visa. But the bad news is that you, for the most part, cannot live in the US, at least for the time being, after those 6 years are done, because there are certain exceptions to this rule, and that's a video for another day. But those are very, very complicated exceptions. It's not very easy to get those exceptions. So as a rule of thumb, 6 years is what you get on an H1B visa, after which you're expected to leave the country and then again enter the lottery system as part of the H1B visa. That's not exactly the most exciting thing, is it? So now in those 6 years, if you manage to get a green card, then that's great. Congratulations to you. You have officially taken a step which allows you to become a permanent resident in the US. But again, now let's talk about point 3, which is the green card, the elephant in the room, which is often looked as the final roadblock in the path to living that American dream. So when it comes to green cards, about 150,000 green cards are issued every year, which is again not a very high number. What makes it even more complicated is the fact that there's a cap as to how many people of a certain nationality can be given a green card. That cap is at 7%, which means if you take 150,000 as our reference point, about 10,000 people would be getting green cards from a specific country, and that's not a very high number, especially when you take into consideration the ridiculously high number of applications from countries like India and China and Mexico, which are very, very popular countries, which are countries that have a very high demand for green cards. So all in all, I think, and again, for me personally, green card is not, it's a stepping stone to getting to where you exactly want to be, because as a green card holder, you do get a lot of rights, but you do not have the right to vote, which I think is a very crucial part of living in a democracy. So again, there's a process which involves getting the American citizenship eventually, but for the most part, people do believe that the green card is the icing on the cake. That's when you can finally sit back, put your feet up on the chair, and just relax. But if you take all of these things into consideration, the OPT and then the H1B and then the green card, I think it's very easy to infer that this is a very long, arduous and miry path. And if you really want to settle in the US, you're going to have to be willing to get your feet dirty. There is no easy path unless you fall in love with an American citizen or green card holder. Then you can get a green card, which actually makes all of these things a lot easier. You can just circumvent all of these things. But again, falling in love and actually getting married is no easy feat either. So go figure. It is either ways. It's a difficult journey out there. Sorry, I think I may have digressed. Maybe not. I think talking about how you can get citizenship through marriage is also is an important consideration which people talk about a lot. But I personally believe that you should not be getting married to someone just to get American citizenship. Marriage is a very sacred thing, a very sacred ceremony, which is and for me personally, I think it would be sacrilege to get married to someone just because I want to get a green card. Again, sorry, I've digressed. The point is that if you don't go the marriage route, it is extremely difficult to get an American citizenship or to get an American green card. So you need to sit down and assess what the objective of you studying abroad is. So for me personally, I wanted to go to the US irrespective of whether I settle down there or not. For a lot of people, that's not the criteria. I was okay with the idea of coming back to my home country. Some people are just totally against that idea, and that's okay. But in that case, you need to know that you need to keep your eyes open, and you need to be open to the idea that you may not be able to settle down in the US. So that's a gamble that you must be willing to take. You cannot have those rose-tinted glasses and think that just because you're studying in the US, you are eventually going to become a US citizen or you're going to get a green card. It is, like we discussed, a very, very difficult path. But if your criteria is to settle down in a country abroad, there are other options that are available, some of which are Australia, Germany, Norway. If you want, I can make another video talking about the most immigration friendly countries for international students. That's a topic for another day, but some of those countries are the countries that I mentioned, which are increasingly becoming hotspots for international students. But again, the lure of the American dream, the elusive set of people who go and get that American citizenship and live that rarefied life, it's something which appeals to a lot of people. And for me personally, I was again okay with the idea of coming back. But if I had to do it all over again, I would go to the US, simply because I do believe that best universities in the world are in the US, and I did want to experience that American life, not necessarily the rarefied life that I was talking about, but just the idea that the US is truly the epitome of being a melting pot of cultures. You have people all over the world. Now an argument can be made that from all over the world, even in Europe and Singapore, universities like INSEAD, but what you get in the US is something, it just stands out, because you have people from Europe, from Asia, from South America, from Australia, from New Zealand. It's just something, and a lot more. We have people from every corner of the planet coming to the US, which I personally think, so for me, that was the standing point and the USP of going to the US. But again, if I was very certain that I did not want to come back to my home country, then, and I did not have a very high risk appetite, I would not have gone to the US, and that's what I would urge you to at least consider before you go to the US. But in case you are open to the idea of studying in the US and then moving to your home country or some other country, then by all means, the US is definitely a great place to go. It has some of the best universities in the world. Again, that international exposure is second to none. So that's a choice that you would have to make on your own. It's a very subjective decision. It's not a decision that I could make for you, but I've laid down the groundwork for what you need to think about when it comes to going to the US. This is the time when you will be getting your admits, and you might have applied to multiple countries, multiple universities. So this is your time to consider whether US is really the place where you want to go, or are you just are you chasing the herd, or are you really willing to, is this something that you really want? That's something for you to decide. And I hope this video has helped you with that, because foreign universities, foreign education is a heavy investment of time, money and resources. And I do personally think that you should get a few years of work experience, at least 1 year of work ex in the country that you studied. I personally did not do that for my reasons. I spoke about that, I expounded on that in a separate video that you can see on the top right hand side of your screen right here. But in case you don't have circumstances like mine, I would highly urge you to at least spend a year you're working in the country that you did your foreign education in. So that's about it, guys. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please leave me one of these. If you're new to this channel, please do share, like, and subscribe. Even if you're not new to this channel, but if you are new, please do subscribe. Promulgate this channel to everyone, anyone and everyone you know. I talk about my personal, academic, and professional experiences. Let me know what kind of videos you would like me to make, and I shall see you soon, very, very soon. Until next time.